All right. Alrighty, Aurea, thank you so much for being here tonight. We're happy to have you. Thank you. We appreciate your time. And you have all of the questions, I believe, that we're asking you, but I'll go ahead and start us off. We'll go through them one at a time. There are 4 total. We are trying to keep this done by 8 o'clock. So if we have time at the end, I assume that we will, but we'll go over questions then. So if you do have questions, hold off until then. If you just have like little clarifying things, feel free to like raise a hand and, talk about it. But yeah, we'll get started. Any questions so far? All right, cool. Alrighty, first question then. Tell us about your agency or organization, the populations that you serve, and the role in the agency.
Sure. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here and for spending this evening with me. In class, I do remember being in my seminars back in the day, and 7 o'clock classes were a thing. So my name is Aurea Bolaños Perea. I'm also go by Aria, she, her, ella pronouns. I am the Strategic Communications Director at Color. Color stands for the Colorado Organization for Latina Opportunity and Reproductive Rights. We are the only Latina-led reproductive justice organization in the state of Colorado and have been for over 25 years. We are an advocacy organization. We do policy work. We also do intergenerational outreach and volunteer programs, leadership programs. A lot of people think that we're an organization that offers direct, client-based and provider-based reproductive healthcare sources. We do not, but we do advocate for reproductive healthcare services and programs and making sure that they are accessible in their access, to not be ironic for it. The populations that we serve are the Latina population across Colorado. We are the second largest populations in our state, but also across the country. And my role as the communications director really is to ensure the messaging and the narrative of Color, our brand standing, supporting our policy department, honestly, every single department, to meet their needs when it comes to public relations, marketing, education, press, media, etc. So I touched a little bit about everything, and Color for me really has signified a space in which we can elevate the voices of Latinos across our state, but also elevate the value of being able to have the freedom to choose what to do with our bodies, the freedom to choose what to do with our futures without interference, obstacles, and many other forms of barriers. So I'll keep it there.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Very cool organization.
I think so too.
Awesome. All right. Number 2 then. How do you and your agency promote or participate in policy efforts in our challenging political climate?
I mean, I just think back about how yesterday was the second anniversary of Roe v. Wade being overturned. And so many of the questions that we get and that I specifically get from reporters are, how have things changed? And how does the community feel now that Roe was overturned? How do Latinos feel about it? And it's like, listen, we've been living in a country where Roe wasn't accessible nor made for people that look like us. I'm an immigrant myself, right? A lot of the federal protections that exist in this country are not made for women like me or people like me with my story. So I thought about yesterday and reflected about my role, but also our communities, and it only underlined the super important fact that in this very challenging political climate, the role that Color plays is to remove barriers to access to care, ensure that people understand that we all deserve the freedom to make decisions about our bodies and our futures without interference, that a right in name only is not actually accessible to all people. So when we are working in policy change, political change, community change, if it's not accessible for all, then it's not justice. That's why we really emphasize that we are a reproductive justice organization. That makes us very different from the big blue and big pink repro organizations, right? not because they do not serve a purpose, but because our purpose is different, right? What does justice mean to you when you are trying to promote equity, when you're trying to promote access, when you're trying to remove barriers to care, right? So we participate in accountability, right? Because we are a C3, so a nonprofit organization, we can't really take partisan decisions, but we can do policy work with representatives that align with our values. We keep them accountable for their actions, accountable for their votes. We collaborate with them a lot. I mean, not sure if the group here has heard about the Reproductive Health Equity Act that got signed into law in April 2022. That the Reproductive Health Equity Act, or REA in its short form, was what we needed 2 months before Roe got overturned in June. Was that those meses? Abril, mayo, junio? Yeah, 2 months. And if REA wasn't in place, then we wouldn't have had any protections in statute when Roe got overturned 2 months later. And REA came about of a discussion in late 2021 amongst Color and our friends at Cobalt Advocates, when we really, honestly, Googled up, it was abortion protected under the law in Colorado, and we found out it wasn't. And we found out there was not even a definition for abortion in our state legislature as of 2 years. It only existed as of 2 years ago, right? And why am I emphasizing this moment and to share with you? Because collaboration, right? So Color, Cobalt came together, said we need to create something because we see what's happening in Texas. We see what's going on in Florida. It's only a matter of time till this movement brings something to impact the most marginalized communities and those in most danger if Roe were to be overturned. So we need to create something. Then REA was born. Then we collaborated with sponsors in the Capitol. Then we ensure that they align with our values, that they align with the results that we were trying to see at the end of the legislative session. And we offered reproductive justice solutions, right? We weren't just going to do like, hey, let's just protect it in the statute and that will be good, right? It's like, no, we had to cover the 4 core tenets of reproductive justice: the right to parent, the right to be able to terminate a pregnancy, the right to be able to live in a safe and healthy community for yourself and your family, and to be able to be your full authentic self. And that is reproductive justice. And that lens allows us to create policy solutions that impact not just the Latina community, but every single Coloradan in this state and every single person that is seeking care in this state. So I'm much more of a storyteller anecdote, so I'll keep it there for there's questions later.
Yeah, wow, amazing. Quick clarifying question on that. So was Color then responsible for creating REA, or was REA created? Okay, so Color created REA. Wow.
Yes.
Cool. Amazing. All right. Question 3. We're doing great. All right. What do you believe are the best mechanisms regarding this issue to reach the community and those most impacted and get community engagement and buy-in about the issues?
You know, $1 million question, truly, because I feel that so many of the mechanisms that you could, you may already, everybody here may be already thinking about are the ones that work. Relationship building, right? I think are one of the most core mechanisms that are important for us when it's regarding healthcare, access to all forms of healthcare. Relationship building, it's not just, you know, meeting somebody while you're tabling or at a resource fair, right? It's really going down to the grassroots of a community, having deep conversations, either offering the resources, offering the knowledge, or connecting them with somebody that could be able to support them. It's also about meeting people where they're at. See, that happens to me when I've been speaking multiple languages in one day. I'm like, how do I say one thing? Meet people where they're at. I'm sure that a lot of folks here are very comfortable using a form of vocabulary that may not usually be accessible to a lot of the folks that we're trying to engage, support, work with, not because they do not have the education or the background, but that's just not where they're at in understanding. And I don't want to say difficult, complicated, right? Resources, policy. So there is that importance. And as a communications director, a lot of my job is to like, all right, we're trying to say that reproductive freedom should be a right for everybody, not just some. How do I even cut it down more? And then how do I make it how do I translate it into multiple languages so that the tone and the message are being received the way that I'm receiving them in English, right? And so just, I know this is not part of the question, but for any people that are multilingual in this room, I do a exercise with myself where I write the messaging, policy and otherwise, in Spanish first, because I already know how to write it in English. So if I'm having trouble expressing myself in my native tongue, which is Spanish, or another language in which I am trying to promote a healthcare resource or a community resource, then you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? Like, then how are you going to remove those barriers? What are the words that you're having to change? Is there a different way to share the message that you're trying to inculcar, that you're trying to promote? Also, investment, right? And investment is not just monetary, it's also time. Do you have the time to go into a community that you are deeply passionate about, or in a group of students, or an area then you feel like you can go out there and, again, relationship build, right, in a way that is also authentic? Because I don't know if any of you have done organizing before, but sometimes when you go and talk to people about programs that you care about, projects that you care about, things that you're trying to promote, they can kind of tell when you're just reading off script, right? So how do you do authentic relationship building? Is by investing your time in something, in a community in which you're passionate about, an area that you're passionate about. And I know that another one is to reach the community and those most impacted to buy in about the issues. Think buy-in, I will flag, is, what does buy-in look like for you? If your buy-in is not meeting the audience and the community members you're trying to help, then there's already a disconnect there. You need to make sure that the buy-in is the buy-in that you're trying to promote matches the needs that the community has. And Color, we annually release what's the first of its kind Latino policy agenda, which is a survey poll for any of my data science people here, like myself, in which we oversample Latinos in rural areas and ensure that we can take kind of a temp check about what issues, policy issues, and political issues are most important for Latinos across Colorado. And then we bring those issues of importance to elected officials and other nonprofit and advocate leaders and say, hey, you know what, for the past 3 years in a row, safe communities, so safe communities, bans on assault weapons, and abortion in the economy are the top 4 issues of Latinos across Colorado. Then we are giving you this data, which they're saying this is across political ideology, this is across ages, this is also people that are turning out to vote for the first time. These are the issues that are going to make sure that they turn out to vote in an election, or that they're paying attention to the policy solutions that you're going to bring in the next legislative session. If you decide to ignore that, then you're not getting aligned with where the community is at, right? Here are 1,600 people that told you exactly what matters to them. And then your buy-in might be like, well, how do I ensure that they vote for what I need? That's not the point. The point is, do you have the data that matches what issues are of importance to them? You need to offer resources that matches their needs. I think sometimes we have that. Again, I keep using the word disconnect. So I'll try to find another synonym for that later. But okay, that's my answer, long-winded and all.
I think disconnect makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Alrighty, last one then. So what ideas do you have for development and implementation of interventions that can help the community and those most impacted by this issue?
I feel like this one is very heavy on on how to answer. What ideas do I have for development and implementation? I think I will start with just ideas, right? We work very closely, and we as in Color work very closely with the Department of Health because was it over a year ago that we launched the reproductive healthcare program. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that. The reproductive healthcare program, but its legislative number was SB 2109. ensures that immigrants, regardless of documentation status, have access to birth control of their choosing for up to 1 year. That also includes vasectomies, right? Because birth control is not just, and we're speaking in the binaries, right, a women's issue. It also impacts men and impacts people across the spectrum. So being able, when we talk about family planning, it includes all of us, right? And we were in this situation where, like, cool, the reproductive healthcare program exists. And how do we make sure people sign up for it? Right. And in right, one thing is passing the legislation or in creating the program, the other thing is implementing it, and the other part is marketing it, and that it ensures it's getting out to community, which is, that's where I live, right? Marketing. And so ideas that came from that. One, how do you sign up for this program? Right? Like, Color had to go through the process of signing up for it, and it took 7 hours the first time around. So then we had to do revisions. The application is too long. Great. Then we made it. We simplified it. Cool. Can we translate it in a way that it matches the English version? Right. Okay. So who's in charge of translating it? Right. And it couldn't just be Color, right? While we are mostly a bilingual staff, like, we did the legislative work, right? So this is where you lead in on friends. Like, I'm talking about, like, ideas, right? Like, when we are working, for me, like, when I'm working with healthcare professionals, providers, or departments, I want to know that those departments have the capacity to meet the organizations like ourselves where we're at, right? You're working with a reproductive justice organization that serves the Latina community, which is mainly bilingual. Do you have the capacity to offer those resources? And if not, do we have a monetary investment or time investment to go somewhere else? Because it just can't be Color, right? And so in this implementation process, we said, hey, if you can support us with the translation, we will support with the marketing, right? Color, we have the only Spanish language reproductive justice radio show in the country. So we use the airwaves in order to market the reproductive healthcare program. We talked about how it started, what it is, where to sign up, and if you have any questions, here is the phone number, right? So we utilize our own mediums. We utilize that we have a big social media presence. We utilize that we have a great relationship with the press. Okay, now you're asking for ideas to help community and those most impacted by the issue. If you're not an organization that has those relationships already built up in the communication side, do you have the network or the community and contacts in order to support us in this effort? And if not, that's where relationship building also comes in, right? So ideas, one, doing an audit on your capacity when you're working with organizations such as ourselves, right? And if not, can you lean in, or can you build a network in order to support both of our efforts and the implementation process? I also feel about being honest with ourselves about where we're at in the moment. Like, is this the best use of our time? Like, is this the best use of our, I don't want to say skills, and time may have a connotation of, like, not everybody has time. You're absolutely right. Not all of us have time to save all the folks that we want to save. But when it comes to access to reproductive health care, removing barriers to care, we also need to be frank if there's a step that needs to happen before we get there. So, for example, in November 2024, Colorado voters are going to be able to vote on a ballot measure that enshrines abortion as a right on our state constitution. We couldn't just bring up that out of nowhere, right? We're just like, I think we're ready. No, REA had to happen. We had to remove other obstacles policy-wise. We had to go to the community and talk to them for years and years and years, every single time, in order to get to this moment. The same thing happens, I believe, when it comes to the reproductive health care program, when it comes to also cover all Coloradans, which I'm not too savvy in, everybody. That is my policy colleague, because that's really their bread and butter. I've worked more in this other policy bills. So ideas, invest in time, capacity, audit on your capacity, ensure that you have a network that can support you in your needs and the needs of the community you are trying to serve. And if you're not the best person for those goals, then it is okay to say that and to lean on other people or call on others to support you. I think so much of the work that we do when it's community based, I myself, as somebody that am a recovering academic, right? It was very honed in on me that I needed to be the smartest person in the room, and if I didn't have the answers, then nobody else did, and that's really detrimental to myself, to the movement, and also to my community. For so many of us, we were brought up in, I quiero decir, collective culture, right? So we also have to have a collective mindset when it comes to healthcare and freedom, and healthcare access. And I span around and around because I wanted to fill as many things as possible. But yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Knowledge. Thank you for all the knowledge. I think that's all of it. So, thank you so much for that. Amazing. And yeah, we'll open it up to anybody, thoughts, questions, discussion points, whatever you have. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, first, thanks so much, Aurea. This was super informative, very cool work. I was curious to hear more about community buy-in, but not just with trying to get folks to support what you're working towards, but also go the extra step in maybe like donating or contributing their time. So yeah, how do you sort of get people to sort of reach the next level?
Sure. Thanks for that question. Community buy-in, so calls to action, right? Like to donate, to turn out, volunteer with us. You really have to message your project, your program, the resource in a way where it matches where the values of the community are at. So now I'm going to talk very directly on like high level comms strategy. So when I'm working on messaging strategy, I do something that's called a message box. So in the middle, it is what's the message you're trying to share. So because I am here as an RJ advocate, I'm trying to, my message is abortion access for all, right? And so I'm like, okay, so that's the message that I'm trying to get them to understand. But what are the values that I have to connect with the person that I am talking to? So the person that has that buy-in, or that I want them to have that buy-in. And now, abortion lives in a specific ideological space, right? But access to reproductive health care impacts everybody, regardless of who you are or where you come from. You deserve access to care, point, period. So what does a value that somebody that may not necessarily be aligned in abortion, but could be aligned in healthcare have? Access to resources, right? Making sure that going to the doctor doesn't create $100,000 in debt, right? Making sure that there's a clinic nearby. So can you message and align with their values first? And that's usually how I can go to somebody that I just meet them for the first time and say, hey, the reproductive health care program exists because everybody, regardless of who you are, where you come from, deserves access to birth control. And somebody might be like, well, who is everybody? And what does it mean where they come from? And it's like, well, have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to be able to have access to birth control or to just a physician, but you weren't able to because you couldn't take time off work or because you didn't have a job? Or et cetera. And so you start seeing where their values align. Like, are they just afraid that their money's getting used some way differently, or they just have like that confusion? You answer those questions, and then you say, you know what, the way that you can help us is either by, can we go to your workplace, talk about the reproductive health care program? Would you like to learn more and receive a newsletter? Or, hey, I know maybe this isn't something that deeply interests you, but we all know somebody that needs access to healthcare. Could you take this information with you, right? And so the way that I can get them to go the extra mile without necessarily being like, give me money, is, do you have time to know where you can find information about this resource? And sometimes that's all we need them to do is like, do you know how to find out that that you have access to up to 1 year birth control without zero pay? So most people don't know how to even start Googling that. Right. So really the buy-in I want them to have is, Do you have the words in order to put it in a search bar? Do you know where you can find this information? Could you at least like, how do I make sure that you leave here with the information without necessarily signing your name to volunteer? So the call to action, the immediate access to information, or just meeting them in their values. And it just looks like you care about access to healthcare, right? And to not, for it not breaking your wallet. Yes? Nah, you leave them there. Hope that answered your question.
Hi, my name is Marika. Gracias por todo. I'm curious about how within your specific role you define intervention, because a lot of the times from a public health standpoint and from even the questions we've been given for this assignment, right, it asks about intervention development as well as the implementation. But from what you've talked about already, it seems like a lot of that is the policy, the outreach, the connection. So I'm curious, as a non-direct service provider, how y'all define intervention and maybe where it overlaps with some of those other components.
Yeah, and if somebody could support me with like dropping the definition of intervention the way that you all are using it, that would be great, because I'm thinking of intervention when I used to work in the conflict resolution center. You know what I mean? Like intervening as a lawyer. And I am sure I'm not using the same definition y'all are working with. So if somebody has that, so I could just quickly glance at it. But I think what I think when I hear intervention, especially in my role, Color intervenes in policy when it causes a harm or consequence to the community. So for example, this legislative session, there was a bill numbered SB 158. It passed unanimously through the Senate. And those had our folks, our people that support Color, love us and collaborate with us. But they didn't really read in between the lines to see that this had harmful consequences for young people that were looking for gender affirming care online. This was a bill that was trying to monitor what young people were searching or asking for on social media apps. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd be talking mad shit on social media in my DMs. And I don't want somebody to be looking at my social media like that, right? That's like my own private space. And so what happens if you're a young person? So last year, the Safe Access for Protected Healthcare package passed, a package of 3 bills. SB 188, if I am not mistaken, ensured that gender affirming care was protected under the Colorado statute. So what if you're a young person that's looking for gender affirming care through social media, having conversations with somebody in a vulnerable space, in an intimate space, and then it turns out that Meta can look into it, or that somebody can subpoena your information and use it against you. And so SB 158, while well-intentioned, had harmful consequences that would have been detrimental to the passage of SB 188 from last year. So what was our intervention? The fact that we basically had to go and kill that bill this session, SB 158, because we were like, listen, we understand the idea about protecting young people, because SB 158's intention was that children shouldn't be like buying drugs or assault weapons online. Like, I get that, right? I get those harmful objects, but what if you're just asking questions about if you're transitioning, right? Or if you have questions about access to abortion care, mifepristone, misoprostol, etc. That would have fallen under harmful subjects or dangerous subjects. And it's like, no, like talking about abortion is not a harmful subject. You know what, you see where I'm getting at? So the way we had to intervene was basically going with for like the electeds that we have collaborated with in the past and say, like, this is a really bad bill and we need to be able to kill it. And it also, in my role specifically, looked like writing an op-ed and putting it out in media right before there was a vote about to be taken on that bill in the Senate, or in the House, sorry, so that there was traction behind it and that there was pressure in order to ensure that the bill didn't pass, that it was an unanimous kill. And that's how we intervene in moments of that case, right? We also intervene in situations in which we are seeing that the Latina community is being continuously marginalized from conversations about access to healthcare, right? As one of the leading organizations to ensure that Latinos are in the decision-making tables, we intervene when we don't see ourselves in the decision-making table, because if we're not there, where are we at? Right? And it should, I don't know, it's, there's this quote, like, if you're not in the table, you're on the menu, right? That's the other way we intervene. If we're not in there making those decisions, or at least advocating for the changes and the needs that we have heard from the community, then we're not doing the service that we were meant to do, right? And yeah, conflict resolution, y'all. Nonprofit spaces, this is rough out here.
Anybody else? Also, I think that you use the correct definition and intervention there. I think that we're all kind of like, yeah, what definition is it?
Okay,
So,
good. I was
job
just
on
like,
that,
I
yeah.
don't know. Something, it's like when folks say like liberation, right? Or like access or equity. I'm like, how are you using that word? Because I'm sure that if I were going with like my statistician buddies, we're not talking about the same thing. So significant for one is not significant for all, but also very happy to answer any other questions that you may have. But I also know you all have a stop at 8. Yeah.
Yeah, I think last call here. Anybody else? Go
I had
for
a
it.
quick question, a little bit off topic, I guess. First, I think intervention can be used as a medical, kind of like a medical intervention. So there's a frame that some public health can be seen that way, as in like a doctor intervening via surgery or something like that. So I think that was an interesting distinction. Does Color operate outside of Colorado in any way, or how do you define community, and is it within state borders?
Such a good and difficult question to ask. So, and you're really hitting at my immigrant soul, because I'm like, I want to do work without borders, because borders are just a man-made concept. So, okay, does Color do we do work outside of Colorado? When it comes to policy and political work, no. But do we have power nationally? Yes. Right. So when we sign on into national letters ensuring that there are federal protections for abortion care, right? When SCOTUS, which by the way, I don't know if any of you law junkies like myself, the EMTALA case is coming out at some point this week, which is the access to emergency abortions. It started in Idaho v. USA. This law has been around for 40 years, and now it's trying to be removed, which means that people that may be having ectopic pregnancies may not be able to get access to emergency care. So at the national level, we do have some pull, because if the court decides to revoke EMTALA, then we would need to be prepared about the questions that are going to be happening in Colorado from our community, right? So policy and political work in Colorado, yet we do also have that pull nationally when we're able to have conversations about like, where's the Latina community on abortion? Where do we stand on reproductive freedom? Are we going to turn out to vote on the November election, right? So that's the way that I would distinguish it. Community, right? How do we define community? For us, our community is literally every Coloradan, every person that's visiting Colorado, any person that could benefit or profit from our work and our mission and value is somebody that we consider community. That's not how I envision community. You do not have to be Latine. You don't have to be an immigrant. You don't have to be a Spanish speaker. Are you somebody that cares about access to reproductive health care? Yes, you're part of our community. Are you trying to remove barriers to care? Yes, you're part of the community, right? Here it is, me giving you the anointed card that you're a community member with Color. And you had another question that you asked. Oh, borders. Yes, 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 yes. So we're a Latina serving organization. It would make no sense that we weren't talking about immigration, right? Also, reproductive justice is an intersectional framework. Immigration justice is reproductive justice. Why? Because immigrants deserve access to reproductive health care. I deserve access to reproductive health care, right? Unless we're going to debate who and what deserves who, when, what. So we ensure that the programs that we create, the policy that we advocate for, and that's why I hone in that message of regardless of who you are or where you come from, right? You deserve access to care. So for us, we also do advocate for the needs of Latinas that aren't just from Mexico. It's all Latino America, right? Which is where our radio show comes in really handy, because most of our listeners are monolingual Spanish speakers, and they're not just all from Mexico. Colorado has a diverse Latina community. So we ensure that we bring in news from other countries, Argentina, Chile, El Salvador, Uruguay, everywhere, to also educate, right, the community that is listening to us, but also for us to educate ourselves about what's happening. Because then, to going back to one of the questions, right, about relationship building and investment, we need to invest in what's happening across our borders, because the US of A is not the only country that exists, right? And it's like, I myself have lived now half of my life in one country and half of my life in another, and I'm still paying attention to what's happening in my home country, right? So also my lens, my policy lens, my communications lens, if it is constricted by the borders in which many of us work within, even I myself have to unpack that, right? Because I am being very tunnel vision about the policy solutions or the healthcare solutions that exist if I do not see how other countries or other communities are doing it beyond the USA. And I don't know about y'all if you have family in other countries, but my family keeps me very humble when I'm having conversations like this. They're like, well, actually, we passed this program, and if you didn't know about it, I was like, shit, why are we doing that here? Right. So I think that also humbles me, and also reminds me that if I stay in my echo chamber for too long, I also get that tunnel vision, and I cannot create great solutions for our community and for your all needs if I steward myself within those mental and physical borders.
Awesome. I think that was a really powerful sentence there at the end there. Cool. Yeah. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Yes.
So I have another question. Given that you've got a bunch of folks who either actively work in public health or are interested in it, given what you do from the larger perspective policy side, is there anything that is either very helpful to get from folks who are directly in public service and public health roles, or things that maybe we should make sure we don't do or stop doing because they're in fact not actually helpful?
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Okay, let me start with, I'm just like, what do I need right now? I would love for y'all to become storytellers for organizations like Color. We're like, so what do I mean by storytellers, right? So when we're doing policy or implementation of programs, we need trusted messengers like yourselves that are in this field to share about the impacts that you've seen if we do not remove barriers to care, the instances maybe that you personally have experienced when you had a long waiting period when you were trying to get like emergency care, or being, well, what I'm trying to say is I need storytellers, because as a trusted messenger in this field, you are taken into account much more than sometimes people like myself, right? Especially for people that may have a preference from hearing from professionals, right? Like yourselves, or even in your own groups, right? When we're talking about access to reproductive health care, all forms of it, talking about reproductive justice. If you're somebody that is willing to talk to the press, willing to talk to your close-knit circle, or be a storyteller in spaces where you know people like myself are not invited to, that's what we need. Right? Because at the end of the day, one of the questions that I get the most from reporters or from community members, that they're like, I want to hear from a man, right? It's still the year 2024, and people are just like, I want to talk to somebody else that isn't you, right? And storytellers, right? Like, I need somebody that's like, well, reproductive healthcare impacts everybody, not just women, right? And like, these are the ways that 6.7 million Latinas were directly impacted when Roe was overturned. So that means that there's an increase in maternal mortality rate. And if you're somebody that can, as a professional in public health or in the health space, and you can talk facts with somebody else that may take you more seriously than they'll take me, that's a great storyteller. That's a trusted messenger. That's what I need right now. What I do not want is somebody that feels like they, well, like, how am I going to put this lightly? What don't I want as a comms person? Okay, everybody. So what I do not want is somebody that's not willing to be challenged to move with the movement is at, right? I myself am somebody that has an ego the size of this very tiny apartment, but also it's meant to say that I have a big ego, okay? And I have a hard time sometimes changing my ways. And I know that that is a learning curve for me, because I had been taught that I always had to have the answers for everything, and I don't. And sometimes I need to be challenged to meet where the movement is at, where my community is at, to be able to use the vocabulary, the messaging, and also be comfortable in the discomfort. So what I don't want is somebody that is not willing to move with me, alongside me. And I also don't want an ally. I want an accomplice. When we're talking about removing barriers to care, I don't want to just be like, oh, I'll sign my name and I'll support you and that's it. No, you need to be actively having these conversations in your circles. You need to be actively communicating and collaborating with us. That's what for me an accomplice is, right? So people say like allyship. I'm like, allyship only goes so far, right? And you're uncomfortable with what an accomplice means. Like, let's talk about it. Let's unpack what makes you uncomfortable about being fully like 10 toes down with ensuring that people that are coming to you and wanting access to care get it, or that you are being a trusted messenger and a change maker in these spaces. Like, what makes you uncomfortable with that? So maybe it was very philosophical, the answer that I gave you, but that's how I feel in this moment.
Thank you for that answer. Cool. All right. Anybody else? Awesome. All right, Aurea, thank you so much for being here and having this beautiful discussion with us. And yeah, I think, thank you. If anyone wants to chime in and say thanks as well, but I know that I'm personally going to go in and look up color right now and see what it's all about and what y'all are doing out there, because yeah, the impact has been amazing, it sounds like. So thank you so much for what you're doing in the community and for Colorado and the nation.
You know, somebody's got to do it. Oh my God, you can tell, right? We're getting into the humor. We're friends now. Thank you, everybody. Please visit our website, colorlatina.org. Follow us on socials. And I will make sure if Hannah wants to share my contact information with you all, that she totally can. I'm here at your disposal if you want to have more conversations, or maybe, I don't know, volunteer with us as a storyteller, or like learn more about what that is. Okay, then if nobody else has any questions, do I just hop off?
I think so. Yeah, go for it. Thank you. And thanks everyone for being here. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Quick question for you, Carly. Are you gonna upload this?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. So yeah, I'll stop recording now. Pause.